The Galactic Empire had ruled the stars for thousands of years. It had crushed countless civilizations, expanding its power across the galaxy. No enemy had ever truly challenged them. No war had ever been lost. The Empire believed in its superiority, in its technology, in its vast and powerful fleets. So when the HFY, an old and wise alien race, came to warn them about humanity, the Empire laughed. Grand Chancellor Vorn sat in the Imperial Council, surrounded by admirals, generals, and the most powerful leaders of the Empire. The auxiliary emissary, an elder named Ralzorak, stood before them, his golden eyes filled with concern. "You must not make war against the humans," Ralzorak said, his voice calm but firm. "You do not understand what you are about to awaken." Admiral Krell, the supreme commander of the Imperial fleet, smirked. "We have conquered thousands of species, Old One. Why would humans be different?" Ralzorak sighed. "Because they are not like others. Humans adapt. Humans endure. Humans never stop fighting, even when all seems lost. You have never faced an enemy like them." The council chamber erupted in laughter. The idea that a small primitive species from a distant world could be a threat to the mighty Galactic Empire was ridiculous. "Enough of these stories," Chancellor Vorn said, waving his hand dismissively. "We have already decided. The humans refuse to submit to our rule. They will be crushed." Ralzorak's golden eyes darkened. "You think you are making a simple conquest," he said. "But you are making a grave mistake. I have seen what happens when humans are pushed into a corner. I have seen how they refuse to die, how they rise from nothing, how they turn weakness into strength. I have seen them break gods." General Tarkus, an older warrior with deep scars on his face, scoffed. "They are barely out of their own solar system. What can they possibly do against the Empire?" Ralzorak looked at each of them, disappointment in his gaze. "You will learn," he said softly. "You will learn the hard way." Then he turned and left, his cloak flowing behind him. The council remained silent for a moment. Then Admiral Krell chuckled. "Old fool," he muttered. "Prepare the invasion fleet. Earth will fall within a standard cycle." The first attack. The Empire's war machine moved quickly. A fleet of 1,000 ships, equipped with the most advanced weapons in the galaxy, set course for the Sol system. Their mission was simple: crush humanity, occupy Earth, and make them submit. The fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system, detecting human defenses near Mars. The Imperial commanders were unimpressed. The human ships were smaller, weaker, outdated. Victory was certain. Admiral Krell stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching the tactical display. "Begin the assault," he ordered. The Empire's warships moved forward, launching plasma blasts and energy torpedoes. The human fleet, though outnumbered, responded immediately. Their ships moved in strange, unpredictable patterns, dodging attacks that should have been impossible to avoid. They used their planet's gravity, asteroid fields, and even debris as cover. Their tactics made no sense, but they were working. Krell frowned. "They fight like wild beasts," he muttered. "Chaotic, unorganized." But then something strange happened. The humans started winning. A group of smaller human ships performed a maneuver never seen before. They weaved between the larger Imperial vessels, striking at weak points in the armor, targeting critical systems. Imperial warships that should have been invincible began exploding. Panic spread across the Imperial fleet. The humans weren't fighting for survival. They were fighting to kill. Krell's second-in-command, Captain Drax, turned pale. "Sir, we are losing ships." Krell's hands tightened into fists. Impossible. But the battle reports did not lie. The Empire's mighty fleet was being torn apart. A desperate retreat. Admiral Krell had no choice. He ordered the remaining ships to retreat, something the Imperial fleet had not done in centuries. The humans did not pursue. They simply let the Empire leave, as if they had already won. Krell sat in his command chair, his face pale. This was just a skirmish, he whispered. Captain Drax looked at him. Sir, what if the Xelari were right? Krell did not answer. He was too busy staring at the reports. The Empire had suffered a defeat unlike any before. And this was only the beginning. The galaxy begins to fear. News of the battle spread quickly. Other alien species, ones who had feared the Empire for centuries, began to whisper. If humans could defeat the Empire's fleet, what else were they capable of? In the dark corners of the galaxy, warlords and rebels who had once hidden from the Empire started preparing. If humanity was strong enough to fight back, maybe it was time to resist. And in the Imperial Council, Chancellor Vorn read the battle report with trembling hands. He looked up at his generals and admirals, his voice shaking. What have we awakened? The Galactic Empire had never tasted defeat like this before. A single battle, one that should have been a mere formality, had turned into an unthinkable disaster. Entire warships had been lost. Tactical systems had been overwhelmed. Human strategies had defied all logic. Admiral Krell stood before the Imperial High Command, his jaw tight, his fists clenched behind his back. Before him sat Chancellor Vorn, the most powerful man in the Empire, along with a dozen other high-ranking officials. They were not pleased. How, Vorn said, his voice calm but ice-cold, did a group of primitive humans destroy an Imperial fleet? Krell swallowed hard. Their tactics are unlike anything we've seen, he admitted. They move unpredictably. They adapt mid-battle. They use their surroundings in ways that defy standard warfare. Excuses. General Tarkus spat, slamming his fist on the table. You had superior ships, superior firepower, more numbers, and yet you were forced to retreat. Krell's hands trembled with rage, but he remained silent. The truth was clear. The Empire had been humiliated. Chancellor Vorn leaned forward. This will not stand. We are the Empire. We do not lose. We crush. His golden eyes darkened. I am sending the Second Fleet. A murmur spread across the room. The Second Fleet was not a simple attack force. It was a full-scale invasion armada. Hundreds of battleships, thousands of soldiers, enough firepower to wipe out entire planets. This time, Vorn said, his voice filled with iron, we will burn their worlds to the ground. Humanity prepares. On Earth, the news of the battle had spread. People were no longer afraid. The Empire had come for them, and lost. Now, humanity knew one thing. The war was far from over. Deep beneath the surface of Mars, in a hidden military base, Commander Elias Reeves studied the incoming data. He was a man who had seen war before, but this was something new. Humanity was facing an unstoppable force, the greatest empire in the galaxy. And yet, they had survived the first strike. A young officer ran into the war room. Sir, the Empire is regrouping. We intercepted transmissions. They're sending their Second Fleet. Reeve exhaled slowly. How long? Less than 2 weeks. The room fell silent. 2 weeks before the Empire's real war machine arrived. 2 weeks before Earth and every human colony faced total destruction. Reeve looked at his officers, his voice calm but firm. Then we have 2 weeks to prepare. The Xelari's warning. Again. In the deep reaches of space, Rel Zorak, the Xelari Elder, watched the events unfold. He had warned the Empire. They had not listened. Now, they were about to make an even greater mistake. His assistant, a younger Xelari scholar, approached. Elder, the Empire is preparing to strike again. Should we warn the humans? Ralzorek's golden eyes narrowed. No, he said softly. They do not need a warning. He turned to the vast stars before him. They are already preparing to teach the Empire a lesson it will never forget. The Second Fleet moved through space like an unstoppable storm. Thousands of warships, armed with weapons powerful enough to break entire planets, traveled in perfect formation. Their commanders believed this would be a simple mission: find humanity's forces, crush them, and erase their existence from the stars. The Empire had done this countless times before to other species. To them, humans were nothing but another primitive race that had gotten lucky in a single battle. This time, there would be no mistakes. The Empire would make an example of Earth. But humanity was not sitting idle. Deep within underground bases on Mars, Titan, and hidden locations on Earth, the greatest minds were working. Engineers, scientists, and strategists gathered to do what humans had always done best: adapt and outthink the enemy. They had seen the Empire's power, and now they were preparing something the galaxy had never witnessed. They would not fight this war with brute strength. They would fight with ingenuity, deception, and sheer determination. Commander Elias Reeves stood in the war room, staring at the holographic display of the enemy fleet's approach. His officers were tense, but he remained calm. "They think they have already won," he said. "That is their first mistake." He turned to his chief engineer. "How soon can we launch the decoys?" The engineer smirked. "We just finished final adjustments. The moment they enter the system, they'll be chasing ghosts." Reeve nodded. "Good. Let's make them believe they're in control, right until the moment we rip it away from them." The Empire's fleet advanced, unaware that they were walking into a battlefield unlike any other. Their sensors picked up strange readings: massive energy spikes in multiple locations, unusual gravity fluctuations, and unidentifiable signals. The Imperial Admiral dismissed them as interference. He had no idea that these signals were carefully designed traps. The humans had transformed the battlefield into a weapon. The moment the Empire fired its first shot, they would learn the truth too late. Humanity was not just defending itself. It was about to show the galaxy why Earth was never conquered before. The Second Fleet arrived at the edge of the Sol system, its warships gleaming under the distant light of Earth's sun. They moved with absolute confidence, believing victory was already theirs. The Empire had never lost a war, and humanity would be no different. Admiral Xeric stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominator, his eyes fixed on the sensor readings. Everything appeared normal, too normal. His instincts told him something was off, but arrogance overpowered caution. After all, what could a backwater species like humanity possibly do to stop the might of the Empire? The order was given, and the Imperial fleet advanced. The first wave of attack ships surged forward, scanning for enemy defenses. There was no resistance, no sign of human warships. It was almost too easy. Then, without warning, a burst of energy erupted from the asteroid belt. Imperial ships detected a massive force heading toward them, too fast to be natural. Panic spread through the fleet as alarms blared. Was it a planetary defense weapon? A new kind of missile? The Empire had never seen anything like it before. Xeric's orders were swift. Evasive maneuvers. Destroy that object. The fleet opened fire, unleashing a barrage of plasma and railgun rounds. The incoming energy signature flickered and vanished. It was a phantom, a holographic projection. Before the Empire could process what had happened, the real attack began. Across the battlefield, hidden mines embedded in asteroids detonated in a perfectly coordinated sequence. Gigantic waves of electromagnetic pulses rippled through space, shutting down entire squadrons of Imperial fighters. Ships lost control. Pilots screamed as their systems failed. Then, from the darkness of space, human warships emerged, smaller, faster, and deadlier than anything the Empire had prepared for. They moved unpredictably, striking key targets with surgical precision. Admiral Xeric watched in horror as an entire section of his fleet was wiped out before they could even return fire. The humans were not fighting like any species the Empire had ever faced. They weren't relying on brute force. They were outthinking them. Xeric slammed his fist on the command console. Regroup the fleet. Retaliate at once. But no response came from half of his commanders. They were already gone. On Earth, Commander Elias Reeves stood in his war room, monitoring the battle. His people had spent weeks preparing, turning the very battlefield into a weapon. Now, they were watching their plan unfold. A young officer looked at him, excitement in her voice. "Sir, they're falling apart." Reeve allowed himself a small smirk. "Good," he said. "Let's show them what happens when you try to take our home." The battle was only beginning, but already the Empire was facing something it had never encountered before, an enemy it could not predict. The fleet that had come to crush humanity was now struggling for survival. The Empire thought this would be an easy victory. They were wrong. Admiral Xeric gritted his teeth as the Imperial fleet struggled to regain control. His warships, once symbols of power and dominance, were now caught in a battlefield designed to destroy them. The humans had anticipated their every move. They had turned asteroids into mines, used decoys to bait Imperial weapons, and deployed a level of electronic warfare the Empire had never seen before. The flagship Dominator was still operational, but Xeric felt something he had never experienced in his long career: uncertainty. The enemy was smaller, weaker, and outnumbered. Yet, somehow, they were winning. The human fleet, though far smaller, moved with incredible precision. They didn't fight like the barbaric species the Empire had conquered in the past. They fought like predators. While the Empire relied on sheer numbers and overwhelming force, the humans relied on deception, strategy, and a ruthless efficiency that sent waves of fear through the Imperial ranks. On board the Dominator, reports flooded in. Entire squadrons had gone dark, capital ships were being surgically dismantled, and command relays were being cut off. Xeric's officers scrambled for solutions, but nothing was working. "They're jamming our targeting systems, sir," an officer yelled. "They're using their own ships as interference." Another voice cut in. "We're losing our long-range comms. Enemy forces are disrupting our command signals." Xeric slammed his fist onto the control panel. This wasn't war. This was a hunt, and his fleet was the prey. Meanwhile, aboard the human command ship Resolute, Commander Elias Reeve watched the chaos unfold with a cold, calculating gaze. Every Imperial mistake, every moment of hesitation, was an opportunity for his forces to strike. The key to victory was not brute strength, it was control. And right now, humanity controlled the battlefield. His fleet had already isolated and neutralized several key Imperial warships. They had sown confusion, broken communications, and turned the Empire's own formations against them. He leaned toward his tactical officer. "Phase 2. The officer nodded. "Ready on your command." Reeve exhaled. Time to finish what they started. The next wave of human attacks came not as a frontal assault, but as a coordinated series of devastating strikes. Small, nimble strike teams infiltrated disabled Imperial vessels, planting self-destruct charges deep within their hulls. Boarding teams hacked into Imperial systems, turning their own weapons against them. Fighter squadrons executed rapid hit-and-run attacks, tearing apart enemy defenses before they could react. On the bridge of the Dominator, Xeric's eyes widened as one of his own battleships suddenly turned its weapons on another Imperial vessel, unleashing a barrage of fire before self-destructing. A trick, a human deception. The humans had hijacked their own ships. How? How were they doing this? His mind raced through possibilities, but he had no time for answers. The humans weren't waiting. They were coming. And then the final blow. Deep within the heart of the fleet, a hidden human warship, one that had remained cloaked, undetected, revealed itself. The Phantom, a prototype human warship designed for stealth and precision strikes, fired a single shot. It was no ordinary weapon. It was a high-energy disruptor designed to overload the power core of any ship it targeted. The shot landed directly on the Dominator. Alarms blared as energy systems overloaded. Consoles sparked. Officers screamed. Xeric barely had time to react before a massive explosion rocked his ship. The bridge filled with smoke. He coughed, struggling to stay on his feet. His flagship, the pride of the fleet, the command center of the entire invasion, was dying. And in that moment he knew. They had underestimated humanity. They thought this war would be easy. They thought humans were weak. They were wrong. The bridge of the Dominator was a scene of chaos. Alarms blared, lights flickered, and the acrid smell of burning circuits filled the air. Admiral Xeric struggled to stay on his feet as the ship trembled violently. Smoke poured from damaged consoles, and officers scrambled to make sense of the catastrophe unfolding around them. The flagship of the Imperial fleet, the very heart of the invasion, was dying. Xeric's mind raced. How had it come to this? The Empire had ruled the stars for thousands of years. It had conquered countless species, crushed rebellions, and expanded without resistance. Yet here, in this unremarkable sector, against a species deemed primitive and insignificant, they had met an enemy unlike any before. The humans did not just fight. They calculated. They adapted. They did not break under pressure. They thrived in it. "Sir, primary reactor failure. We are losing containment," an officer shouted. Xeric gritted his teeth. He had never known defeat. He had never considered the possibility that an enemy could outmaneuver the might of the Imperial war machine. And yet here he was, watching his fleet collapse around him. Through the main viewport, he could see the remains of his once great armada. Imperial warships burned in the darkness, their shattered hulls drifting through space. The once mighty fleet, designed to dominate entire star systems, was being hunted down like prey. It was not just a battle. It was an execution. On the human command ship Resolute, Commander Elias Reeve stood with arms folded, watching the Imperial fleet fall apart. His plan had worked. Every Imperial assumption, every tactical expectation, had been used against them. The Empire had come expecting a traditional war, a contest of numbers and brute strength. But humanity had not played by their rules. Admiral Xeric's ship is still operational, his tactical officer reported. Reeve nodded. "Not for long," he replied, his voice calm. The final stage was about to begin. On board the Dominator, Xeric knew the battle was lost. His fleet was in ruins, his command structure broken, his weapons failing. The humans had cut them off, isolated them, and picked them apart with brutal efficiency. He had fought countless wars, but never against an enemy like this. "Sir," a desperate voice called out. "Incoming transmission," from the human flagship. Silence fell over the bridge. The humans were calling him. "Put it through," Xeric ordered, his voice strained but firm. A moment later, the holographic display flickered to life, revealing Commander Elias Reeve. The human officer stood relaxed, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. He did not speak immediately. He simply stared at Xeric, as if deciding whether to waste words on a defeated enemy. "You should have listened," Reeve finally said. His tone was not mocking, not arrogant, just cold. Xeric clenched his fists. "You believe you've won," he growled. "The Empire is vast. This war is far from over." Reeve tilted his head slightly. "You misunderstand," he said. "This isn't a war. This is a lesson." Xeric frowned. Reeve leaned in slightly. "You thought humans would be easy to conquer. You thought we'd break. You thought we'd surrender. But you never understood what we are." His voice was steady, his words measured. "We don't surrender. We don't bow. We survive. And when we fight to win." Xeric felt something he hadn't felt in centuries. Not frustration, not anger, fear. Reeve's expression remained unchanged. "You came here thinking you were the hunters." His gaze darkened. "But you're the prey." The transmission cut out. A moment later, the final human strike began. The last remnants of the Imperial fleet were targeted with merciless precision. Coordinated missile barrages ripped through Imperial hulls, cutting off escape routes. Fighter squadrons swarmed the battlefield, hunting down damaged ships, ensuring none would escape. The Empire had sent an armada to crush humanity. Now there would be no armada left to return home. Xeric's hands trembled as explosions rippled through the Dominator. The ship's structure began to fail, decks collapsing, fires spreading. His officers screamed, some fleeing their posts in desperation. He had lost. As the ship's systems shut down around him, Xeric let out a slow breath. He had always believed the Empire was unstoppable. He had believed in imperial superiority. But today, he had learned a terrible truth. Humanity was not just another species. They were something far more dangerous. The Dominator was breaking apart. Fires spread across its decks, entire sections were collapsing, and the once great Imperial flagship was now nothing more than a dying husk in the vast emptiness of space. Admiral Xeric stood on the bridge, his grip tightening on the command console as he watched his empire's might crumble before his eyes. His fleet was gone, his soldiers were dead, and the humans had done it without mercy. The Resolute loomed ahead, untouched, its hull gleaming in the starlight. It had moved with ruthless efficiency, striking not where the Empire was strong, but where it was vulnerable. Xeric had fought wars for centuries. He had crushed rebellions, shattered fleets, and rewritten the history of conquered worlds. But he had never encountered an enemy like this, an enemy that refused to play by the rules. "Sir," a trembling officer said beside him, his uniform stained with blood and soot, "we need to evacuate." His voice was weak, as if the very idea of fleeing was more painful than death. Xeric's eyes remained fixed on the human warship. "No," he said. His voice was hollow. He had nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The Empire had miscalculated. They had believed humans were just another primitive species to be crushed. They had assumed superior numbers and technology would guarantee victory. But humanity had done what no other species had. They had fought back, not just with weapons, but with a cold, calculated fury that could not be matched. The ship lurched violently as a final explosion tore through its core. The bridge lights flickered, and emergency sirens wailed in despair. The Dominator was dying. Across the battlefield, the last remnants of the Imperial fleet were being hunted down. There was no escape, no survivors. Human warships moved like wolves among the wreckage, eliminating any who dared to flee. There would be no stories of heroism, no survivors to warn the Empire. Humanity wasn't just defeating them. They were erasing them. A final transmission blinked onto Xeric's display. It was from the Resolute. The screen flickered to life, and once again, Commander Elias Reeve appeared before him. His expression was unreadable, his eyes sharp with something far more terrifying than rage. Calm, calculated certainty. "This is the end," Reeve said simply. "Your fleet is gone. Your Empire will never know what happened here, and you will not be remembered." Xeric's breath caught in his throat. "You think you've won," he snarled. "The Empire will send more fleets, more armies. Humanity cannot stand against the full strength of the Empire." Reeve didn't even blink. "There will be no reinforcements, no Empire left to send them. Because this war doesn't end here. This war starts here." He leaned forward slightly. "The difference between you and us is simple. You fight to conquer. We fight to survive. And nothing in this galaxy has ever survived a war with us." The transmission cut out. Xeric barely had time to process the words before the Resolute fired its final barrage. The Dominator's hull ruptured as human torpedoes tore through its weakened structure. Decks collapsed, explosions ripped through the corridors, and the Imperial flagship, the pride of the Empire, was reduced to a burning wreck. Xeric stood in silence as fire consumed the bridge. He had always believed the Empire was eternal. He had believed in its strength, its power, its absolute control over the galaxy. But today, in his final moments, he understood the terrible truth. The Empire had never been invincible. It had simply never encountered humanity. As the flames closed in, Xeric let out a slow breath. He had seen many species fall, had watched civilizations burn under the Empire's rule. But now, as the darkness took him, he knew. This was different. This wasn't the fall of just one fleet. This was the beginning of the Empire's end.